We're here because this upcoming symposium is on the topic of animals in the arts, and we've asked faculty members to talk about some of their favorite works or architecture in this case that includes animals in it. So I'll let you take it away, but we're excited to hear what you have to share.
So today I think I'll talk about, there's so many animal buildings to really talk about, but I'm going also because I sort of finished talking about the Baroque in my lecture course. I thought I'd start there. The elephant that I am going to talk about today is Bernini's Obelisk, an elephant. It's actually the last project that Bernini worked on. It was finished in 1667, and it was actually based on a project that he had designed earlier for a different obelisk for the Barbarinis. It was supposed to be placed in front of the Barberini Palace, but that project never came to be. But what's also even more interesting than the fact that he had actually designed it earlier is that it was based on a drawing, actually a woodcut, that was produced by Francesco Colonna. Actually, though it's the authorship is sort of under question, some people have actually attributed this particular book. Well, it's an illustration in a book, a Venetian publication from 1499 called Polyphemus's Dream. That's the English translation. And some people have, while it is dedicated by Francesco Colonna, some people actually say that it was written by Alberti. So this book had an of an elephant with an obelisk going, sort of impaling it, actually. But so this imagery has been around for a while, and Bernini was certainly familiar with it. And that was probably the reason that he proposed it for the obelisk in front of the Barberini Palace. But that ended up not coming to be. And one day, while there was construction going on while this is in the 1660s now, in the mid 1660s, they were excavating the site for Santa Maria sopra Minerva, the Piazza Minerva. When they were excavating that site, under one of the walls that they were just digging out, as you do when you start construction, they found an obelisk, as was very common at that time, when there were tons of projects in Rome. It was a small obelisk and is actually the smallest of the 13 ancient Egyptian obelisks that were found in Rome, really starting in the 16th century, but really most of them were found in the 17th century. And so it's the smallest, and I actually am I'm not an ancient expert, so I'm not certain of the actual place it originated from, but I know that it was Diocletian who brought the obelisk to Rome. So it was found in the mid 1660s, and they wanted to erect it as in the middle of the piazza in which it was found. And so Bernini decided to build this to finally realize this idea he had for this obelisk that stands on an elephant. And sorry, I should have written it down for this interview. It has a really wonderful inscription on the base, and it's something like an elephant can carry the wisdom of Egypt, something like that. And I think it's really a wonderful example of the sort of Egyptian revival in Rome, and of a particularly Baroque interest in the cult of Isis, which dates back to the early days of the Roman Empire. And and one of the things that you start to see emerging in the Baroque period is an attempt to reconcile Rome's very complex history, its pagan history, its Egyptian history, its imperial history, with a sort of Christian Rome, like a Rome that's trying to position itself as a center of Christendom. So the Baroque as an aesthetic really is an aesthetic of antitheses, right? That brings into play all of the tensions of a complex past and tries to resolve them in a sort of single, a sort of fluid composition, one that overcomes the antithesis of a seemingly a past that's seemingly in conflict with itself. That is my favorite elephant. There are more, and I think I could go on, but there are occupiable elephants. Like the elephant in Obelisk is not occupiable, so it's not technically architecture. But also the other detail I wanted to include about the elephant in Obelisk is that around 1630, at the same time that Bernini knew that was aware of the dream of Polyphemus. It was at that time that a real elephant was first brought to Rome for the first time in about 100 years. It arrived in 1630. There are records of this. And so Bernini was able to carefully study the anatomy of the elephant. And you can see that in the wonderful detail in the elephant and Obelisk. And so there is this is another thing that's brought into the sort of the aesthetic language of the Baroque is an interest in what's called natural history or the natural world, and also this deepening archaeological history of Rome. With this desire again to place Rome as the center of Christian empire and thus the center of architectural production. And so it really brings together all of these really wonderful things in a single object.
Wow, that's so great. Can I ask you a bit about the size of the obelisk?
So the obelisk itself is about 5 meters tall. So it's a diminutive obelisk. And unlike some of the other like much larger obelisks that you see right in the center of the Piazza San Pietro. With the addition of the base plus the elephant, it more than doubles in size. But it's still a fairly, if you visit it, it's a fairly small obelisk. It's not incredibly imposing, and in fact, the elephant is nowhere. It looks more like an elephant cub. What's a baby elephant called? A little elephant. It's a baby elephant, and that sort of adds to its endearing quality. So, and it's actually the face of the elephant is very calm. It's almost, and it has an almost a sweet to its face, and so that adds to its charm. So, and packaged as it is as a sort of baby elephant, it's really just an incredibly charming object.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. It's also so fitting with Tufts and the Jumbos and the
You're
name of our
welcome.
symposium. So it's great.
I know it was so hard for me to pick which elephant, since there are actual examples that are based on Jumbo himself. So Lucy, which is, a misnomer because Lucy has tusks, and tusks are male, but in any event, it's, but I like that gender ambiguity. Lucy is interesting in that way. But yeah, so there are lots of elephants, and I wish I could talk more, but there are there's a lot of examples in architecture history of and maybe it's because I'm just going to say one more thing. I just tied to the title of your tied to the to the title of your symposium. One of the reasons that elephants are chosen, of course, for architecture that is shaped like animals is because it's so big. They're so large, right? They're actually, and their proportions are such that they suggest occupiability, And they stand on 4 stable legs, which also makes it sort of a natural for architectural adaptation. And so, so that is sort of one of, I'm assuming one of the reasons that you find so many elephants at this time, in addition to the fact that the times you happen to see lots of elephants come into architecture, and it happens at various different times, but the historical context in which you tend to see elephants enter the picture are moments when there is an interest in a world outside of the Western world. So when elephants are brought in as sort of examples of an exotic world beyond. Also, elephant imagery is often associated with Alexander, and with a sort of history of imperial conquest via Alexander. And so that's why Napoleon really wants, Napoleon is referencing Alexander directly when he commissions his elephant building, which gets placed where the Bastille, where the July column is, and where the Bastille is. And so so it is associated with ideas of both the exotic and with imperial conquest. And so lots of stuff to get into, but I think I've talked enough.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
As I always do, I overtalk.
No, that's great. All of these have sort of gone longer than we planned, but it's that makes a lot of sense too structurally, that an elephant would fit sort of the architectural need. So that's great.